Hey everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. Want me to send out 2,000 parcels to help grow my business? Okay. In 2017, I signed for my webshop a contract with our national mail carrier to deliver my parcels. The more parcels, the better rates you get. In my league, they had a 1,000, 2,000, or 5,000 parcel target contract. I went with the 2K one. At the end of year one, there would be an evaluation, and they said they would be very flexible and reasonable because their priority is to help grow my business. I actually had that in writing. For any parcel I had sent through them beyond the 2,000 target, I'd get a 50% refund of the difference between the 2,000 and 5,000 rate. In example, 2,000 rate is €3.5 per parcel, and 5,000 rate is €3 per parcel. They would refund me €0.25 back for each parcel above my 2,000 goal. On the other hand, for each parcel I was short at the end of the year of the 2,000 target, they would charge me double the difference between the 2,000 and 5,000 rate, on top of a flat rate penalty fee. So basically €1 per parcel I was short in the above example, plus penalty. End of year one, my contract is 2 weeks away and I'm sitting at 1,850 parcels. Thinking that 92.5% of my target is pretty good for year one, I gave them a call to talk about the extra charges and the penalty, and see if I could get the 5,000 rate for the next year as I was seeing and expecting strong growth. In the end, it was their priority to help grow my business, and they were very flexible and reasonable. No, sir. They were dead set on me paying the penalty. Charge me extra for the 150 parcels, and on top of that, they would set me back to the more expensive 1,000 target rate for the next year. Tried to escalate it, but to no avail. So far for help growing my business and being very flexible and reasonable, in comes malicious compliance. I did the math and paying the penalty plus extra charges was nearly double of what it would cost me to reach my target if I would just pay for 150 extra parcels out of my own pocket. I bought 150 bubble wrap envelopes dirt cheap, printed 150 stickers with my own address, put those on each envelope, drove to the mail office and dropped off 150 empty envelopes. Next morning, the mailman arrives at my door with a grin on his face. He is a cool guy. And a stash of envelopes, wondering what the freak am I up to. Later that day, I called them to let them know I had reached my target and that I would not renew my contract. I signed with a competitor for about the same price per parcel, no strings attached, and did 17,000 parcels in year two, which amounts to around €50,000 in business they missed out on. So let me ask you this. If you were in OP's shoes at 1,850 parcels knowing you needed 150 more to reach that target, and this national mail carrier is trying to shortchange you and force you to pay these penalties, what would you do? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. Boss hired me with purple hair. Year later, unnaturally colored hair no longer allowed. So this is just me venting about something that happened to me a few years ago while having unnaturally colored hair. Still do, by the way. It currently looks just like my Reddit avatar at the moment. I could go on and on about how it sucks that companies won't hire you just because you have unnaturally colored hair. It doesn't matter how good your resume is. But that's a story for another day. Right now, I'm going with the worst instance of this being an issue with an employer I had. When I was brought in for an interview for a hardware store, I had most of the front of my hair dyed in a bright lilac color. The interview went smoothly and the main boss of the place even complimented my hair. They went so far as to ask if I dye it often, to which I said yes. I change it every few months and was planning on going with a pink color next month for spring. So they were fully aware of the fact that I had no intentions of changing it to a natural color before hiring me. I was brought onto the team and put into the garden department, and I was the only one on staff that had unnaturally colored hair. I, of course, would change the color every few months and life went on. I got nothing but compliments from customers and staff alike. I worked there for about a year with no issue. Though a few other staff members over that year handedly told me that other employees quit prior to my employment because of the hair policy the store had. I was confused by this since nobody had said anything to me when I was hired, nor in the almost year I worked there. So I shrugged it off. That is, until I was brought into the boss's area and he asked why my hair was dyed blue, as it was against store dress code and I needed to have it changed by my next shift. Which again, this is the guy who hired me, with purple hair. I was so dumbfounded that I even pointed that out to him. He kinda sputtered and said that there was a change in policy and stated that it needed to be changed by tomorrow. What had made me mad about this was that I had just purchased my next dye kit, as the blue color was finally starting to show signs of fading. I asked if I could have more time as it would take a while to bleach the color out of my hair safely without damaging it. His solution? Dye my whole head black. Now, let's just say I have many problems with that. I spent years and quite a bit of money safely bleaching my hair in the front to be able to color it whatever I like, especially since my natural color is a dark auburn and it is almost impossible for any dye to take to it, as well as to bleach it white enough to take color. It took me forever and quite a few salon visits to make it this way in the first place. So half of my hair was bright blue and half of it was a dark purplish red. For anybody who knows about coloring hair, reds and blues are the two worst colors to get out of hair, and just dyeing over it won't exactly work. Trust me, I've tried to do similar methods on coloring mistakes. Dyeing over bright neon colors with a darker color won't always work. If the dye doesn't take, it can just fade after a few washes and reveal the neon color underneath. At least, that's what has happened to me quite a few times. Plus, one day I wanted to dye my whole head because I hate dark colors for my hair. Why else would I color it such bright, pretty colors in the first place? So I politely mentioned that it would just fade and be blue or red again after a few weeks if I did what he was asking. He scoffed, suggested dyeing it over a couple more times, and finally just said to fix it as soon as possible. Which I did. I turned my hair silver over the course of a week. I used as much color remover and bleach as I could, safely of course, and did many oil and repair treatments on my hair in between. He couldn't do jack crap because then the older staff would also have to get in trouble for having silver or white hair. I ended up quitting a month later though, as a better job came up. That's such a great idea. No unnatural hair colors. So you go silver because you can't argue that, hey, silver's an unnatural hair color, even if it normally is for a younger person. Guests cannot spend the night at my property. Back when I was in college, I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with a nice German student. He was a nice guy and he would often have his friends over. I didn't mind it at all because I had just moved to the area and needed new friends anyways. Our landlady though, she was a nightmare. She was this small, grumpy lady who would complain over the smallest things. She doesn't live with us but tries to control everything. The color of our sheets, the scent of candles that we light, where we put our stuff, etc. Needless to say, we hated her. We pay for our electricity and water, so it doesn't matter if we have our friends and family stay over once in a while, because whatever they consume more of, we will foot the bill ourselves anyways. My sister visits me once a month for one night, just whenever she's in town. One day, my landlord found out and got so mad she wanted to call the cops on us for not respecting the rule of guests cannot spend the night at her property. The only reason she does this is because she feels if a guest would stay the night, they would have to pay her the full rent for the month. But cue malicious compliance. When one of my German roommate's friends was laid off from his main job, he was left homeless with only a grave shift part-time job. He asked if he could stay with us for about a week or two. I told him I didn't mind, but my landlady might mind. They told me not to worry. And she was fuming when she found out. Easily the day after he decided to stay with us because she checks on us unannounced every other day and has security cameras outside our door. She threatened to call the cops on us again, and all my roommate said was, "But you told us explicitly no one can spend the night at your property." He is never here at night because he's working, so there's no rule broken here. She had nothing to say and left. We could hear her screaming from inside her car that was parked right outside. Edit: I had to pull my copy of the contract out, and we didn't have a specific clause on overnight guests, nor do we have a clause on visits. It did say at the end though that whatever isn't explicitly stated, when questioned, will pivot on California state laws. So this was totally illegal. My roommate and I were just young, stupid international students who let her get away with it. But it definitely makes for a fun story though. Now, I'm no expert on laws and stuff, but it does definitely sound like a number of things here probably aren't legal that the landlord is doing. I'm glad the landlord stopped bothering them after this incident, or at least it sounds like they did. Blood slides must be perfect. You got it, boss. A few years ago, I worked for a diagnostic company named after a certain mythical firebird. This was a veterinary diagnostic company, and I was a cytotechnician. My job was to perform CBC counts, evaluate cerebrospinal fluid, fix tissue and formalin for the histologist, make fecal smears for our microbiome team, slice brain matter and fix it into paraffin blocks, you name it. I even sorted sperm by sex for dairy farms who wanted to have their breedings result in fewer males. Now, I loved the work. It was dirty work, don't get me wrong. I dealt with everything from gallon jars of horse urine to chunks of flesh torn from cancer-ridden dogs. Even a polar bear head from a suspected smuggling case. My proudest moment was confirming pregnancies, including being on the phone with a zoo while I confirmed pregnancy in a lovely wolf eel named Matilda. I was an overnight tech, so I didn't interact with the bosses, pathologists, microbiologists, etc. I took care of the emergencies and gave any critical data to the veterinarians on the case. But most of the time it was stuff that could wait for the pathologist to wake up. The chief pathologist got the worst cases, and he was a prick. I was to have all of his slides, data, and patient files arranged alphabetically on his desk by 6 a.m. And he meant 6 a.m. I came in at 6:05 because a chunky sample had clogged the Advia, and he was sitting at his desk in complete and total darkness, waiting for me. He switched on the lamp when I walked in and gave me a heart attack. Now, this chief pathologist didn't like me. I'm loud, I have crazy hair and stretched ears. We're laboratory workers. No one from the public interacts with us, so the dress code boils down to, as long as it's lab safe, you're good. Being an ancient chief pathologist with the withered soul of a dementor, he didn't like this. He hated that I was gay, that I joked around with co-workers. In his mind, this was austere work and we're never allowed to have any fun ever. So he began sending back my slide books. This man would wake me up at 9 a.m. after a 10-hour shift and ask why sample 106542 was chunky. As in, he thought the blood on the slide was too thick to read and demanded that I remake it for the next morning. Now, I take pride in my work. People trust vets to diagnose their pet correctly, and it's my job to help Fluffy recover just as much as the vets. Not to mention, I saw repeated draws, so I knew a few patients by name alone. I asked a few other techs to give feedback on my slides and got approval from them before sending them up to the Dementor. He began sending back whole lots of slides to the point where he was doubling and tripling my work for the night. The clients began to notice. I wasn't spending as long on sperm sorting and the dairy got pee. A few fecals had to be delayed. Always the same feedback from the Dementor. The slides are too thick. I can't read the slides. You're killing patients. He once marched downstairs and actually threw a book of glass slides at my head. Don't freaking send them up here until they're perfect, he snarled and marched back upstairs. I was petrified, holding a tray of urine and covered in broken borosilicate glass. Not send them up until they're perfect? Absolutely, sir. I shoved my non-emergency cases off on a coworker who needed more sperm, urine, and fecal practice, and I threw my back into making blood and CSF slides. My tissue was eagerly taken up by a coworker who wanted to learn histo, so my work was covered. Since everyone hated the Dementor, it wasn't hard to get folks to help me. I pulled slides the Dementor had made personally and set that as my standard. Presumably, he's able to read his own freaking slides. I did them over and over again until they were perfect. No cells were ruptured, no streaks, dyed to perfection, labeled clearly as anything I could label. These were slides that could have gone to the goddamn Museum of Hematology. They were actually better than his. I send a 300 slide lot of perfect, beautiful, lovely slides to my boss. He admires them, compliments my work, and I get the paperwork packet ready. Not only do I organize it by alphanumeric patient name and number, I organize it by ER cases on top so he doesn't have to hunt for them. I ask the veterinarians for patient records and attach those. I put them each in their own lovely case folder labeled with the patient number and name. I send this gorgeous packet up to the Dementor exactly at 6 a.m. He's of course waiting. He picks up a slide, sets it on the microscope, and immediately I see him stop. They're beautiful. You can see every white blood cell. The pathogens stand out like I had freaking asked them to. I'm standing there with a crap-eating grin on my face, thank him for his time, and go downstairs to gather my things. I'm woken up again, this time by HR. They ask me to come in and nervously I drive to the lab. I find out the Dementor is accusing me of wasting sample, as I had essentially used up most of the sample prepping the slides. After all the other techs had pawed the tubes, there was only enough for 1 or 2 retest runs. There were other technicians' names on histo, fecal, and urine reports, so some of the other doctors got a little peey. I tell HR about the Dementor screaming at me to not send the blood slides until they were perfect. Since I am committed to the health and well-being of my patients, I pulled slides the Dementor had made and followed his standard. By his own standards, the slides were, in a word, perfect. HR immediately turned on him and asked why he would ask me to be written up for performing my job. Dementor grumbled something about the samples, but since there was enough for analysis, he couldn't really nail me on anything. Unfortunately, the Dementor did eventually win and get me fired. He complained about everything under the sun, including things like asking why diarrhea samples were streaked. Nature of the beast. But I never heard anything about any blood samples I ever handed him ever again. And since pathology labs keep example slides indefinitely for reference, those beautiful slides I made will be standing next to his for eternity. I hope that puts a burr up his butt as much as it helps me sleep at night. I like to imagine he has to pull those perfect slides to reference a case and purses his leathery lips at the initials on the slide. Sounds to me like this dude probably had too much say in the operations of this place, so OP never truly stood a chance, but it probably felt pretty good to get back at him with these slides, even though in the end, they did end up losing their job. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today, so what I want to know is which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you all so much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.